Hello everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at a topic that I've had a couple questions about in the past, and I've sort of covered it, but I don't think I covered it properly in those videos, so I think here we're going to do a dedicated one. And this is rendering multiple turbo streams at the same time. So the way that I did it in a previous video, or probably 5 or 10, is when you have something, I'll just move over my notes real quick, you have something where you have this response. I was rendering a like a turbo stream, and then I just had an array where I had like turbo stream dot replace number 1, and then turbo underscore stream dot replace number 2. And of course, this is kind of ugly. You throw all this in a controller, it doesn't really look right. So today we're going to be taking a look at an alternative approach, which is going to be similar to what you probably saw with using js.erb files in the past, if you're familiar with that. You create a dedicated page, and then you just render that page, and then that page has all of your TurboStream logic on it, where you can have 5 or 10 different TurboStream actions that you fire off on that one page, and then that can modify the page you're currently on. So to take a look at this, we'll just do a Rails new video, and we'll hopefully CD into it, but I just want to CD into it. I don't want to have to use Bootstrap. And while that's running, we'll just take a look at the Turbo documentation real quick, just in case you're not familiar. There are 7 actions, and you're going to be able to put all of these into this, this page. So you can either append or prepend. Append is going to put it to the end of the list. Prepend will put it to the beginning. So if you have a list of things right here, if you want to put like this at the top, that's going to be, I guess I stop my server. That's going to be a prepend. If you want to put it at the bottom of this list, that'll be an append. And yeah, we can go down here real quick, just cover the rest. Replace is pretty self-explanatory. Update, also pretty self-explanatory. You do want to be careful though, because if you're replacing, you're just, you're kind of nuking it and then adding whatever contents you'd like. Update, you're kind of changing the existing. Remove is just going to, completely axe it. And then before and after is just before the element based on the DOM ID. Same thing for after. Slightly different from like append and prepend because you're targeting a element, right? So here you have like your target. But okay, I have this open in VS Code. Real quick, we're just going to generate a scaffold. So say Rails G scaffold for a post. Post will have a title and a content of type text. We're going to run a Rails db migrate, and we can run a Rails S because we're done in the terminal. Next, let's come into our config and our routes.rb. And here, let's make this have a root. And I'll bump up the font size a bit. So it should be root to the post controller index action. Okay, now that we have that, we can go ahead and close that. And now we can pretty much just experiment how we would like. So let's start by going into the form here. And let's mess around in the form. The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to tell it where we want to modify the form. So what I'm thinking is we'll do something where we just render the errors with the turbo stream, and we go from there maybe. So let's get rid of these post errors, and let's just put a turbo frame down here, and then we'll do a end right here. So this is just going to be an empty turbo frame with a new post. You could of course wrap the whole frame in it, or the whole form in it, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to leave this sitting like this. We can then come over to our controllers and our post controller, and then in our post controller, inside of the create action below the format.html, we can do another one where we just say format.turbo_stream. And instead of doing any sort of turbo stream render, we can just do a render for the create with a locals, and then we can pass in the post that was just created, that post, just like that. We can copy this and paste it in here under the else. Of course, this is if we run into an error. So in this case, we want it to render the new. And we want it to also have the status of unprocessable identity, just like that. And optionally, you can also include the locals if you're so inclined, and then you want to close these braces. So what we can do now is we can go create this. So we have a create action and a new that we have to create. So we can come into our post, right click, new file. We'll start with create, or we can just do a create.turbo_stream.erb. And what this is going to allow us to do is inside of here, we can just tell it what needs to happen if we successfully create a post. So what I'm thinking we'll do is we'll move the form to the index page. So let's come into the index page, and on the index page, right above the post right here, we're just going to do a h2 for a new post. We'll render the form and we'll pass in a post.new. So this will be right on the main page. The benefit of this is we also have a div with an ID of posts here, which we can target. So let's, when we create a new post, which is in the post controller create action, let's respond with the format TurboStream. So when that happens, I want to go into this posts div and I want to prepend the new post on top of the rest of the posts. To do this, we can just create a TurboStream.prepend for the posts, because that's what we called this div ID right here. So we can target it like that. And then in here, we can just put pretty much whatever we want to happen here. I can just put the word test in here. We can come over to our index page right here, our localhost port 3000, where we have this post form. I can do a test in a case and click create post. And you can see it's just putting the word test in there. Of course, we don't want the word test in there. What we probably want to do is put like a partial in here. So we'll just do a render partial for a post, pass in the locals, which is this at post, which we're of course getting because we're passing in the post, right? So once we do this, we can come over here and we can do, let's say, hello world with another word here. And then now if we click create post, it'll render this partial, which is coming from our underscore post.html.erb. Again, it happens without needing to refresh the page. One thing you'll notice though is our form still has stuff in it. And this is where the benefit of having multiple actions here can come in. Because remember, if we come over to the turbo reference, we can see that there is a remove, which we don't necessarily want to use, or an update. We could use that, but it's a bit cumbersome. What I'd like to do is use the replace. So what we'll do is we'll say, all right, let's do another turbo stream. We'll call .replace. And what I want to do is replace a new post. And what we can do with this is in our form, well, actually, let's do this. Yeah, let's just grab this whole thing. We'll do the errors in a second here. Let's put the entire frame here around it. So now the form has a turbo frame tag surrounding the entire thing, just like this. And then we do a turbo frame tag new post do, and then the end block right here. We can now come over here and target this new post specifically. And we can say, all right, for this form, I want to do a partial. And the partial should be a form, because this is coming from the perspective of being in the posts directory already, because that's where this file is, this create.turbostream. And I want to do some locals, and I want to pass in a post with a post.new, because a post.new won't have a title or a body, right? So when we render this, or when we replace the new post content, which is this form, with a new post object, there's not going to be anything here. So if I now try this, saying, I don't know, testing, this should be wiped when I hit submit. When I click this, it'll replace this form with a empty form. If we click create post, you can see this is where we run into an issue. We now have this, this title and this content right here, because this is actually my fault. In the form, we had this previously down here. I moved it, but I didn't refresh the page. So if we refresh the page now the whole thing should hopefully be put inside of that, that turbo frame tag. And now if I do a test, say test 1, 2, 3, if I hit create post, you'll see it just deletes the contents of it or just replaces it with something that's empty. But okay, how do we do the errors here? Well, as you'll recall, that is probably going to be in the create right here, or oops, in the controllers, we have the render for the new. So we have to get this to, first of all, error, and then we have to create this new view. So let's come into our models real quick and our post.rb, and let's just make this like validate the title to say it has to have a title. We can then come into our app views posts, because if we try it right now and we just do ASDF and hit create post, you'll see content missing on the form goes away. And the reason for that is if we come over here, we have a action view missing template. We're missing post/new, which we have, but it's looking for a post/new with a format of TurboStream. So let's just go ahead and do that real quick. Let's come over to our posts folder, new file, and we'll say new.turbo_stream.erb. And then in this new turbo stream, you can again do whatever you would like that follows that same logic. So we can say, all right, let's do a turbo stream replace for the new post, which is again that that wrapper around the form. And now let's just render the partial with, or render the form partial with the locals of post or at post, because right here where we do this rendered new status unprocessable, we're going to be having access to this post object. So we come over here and we just leave this blank. If we click create post, hopefully see that we get this unprocessable entity here, but we're not getting any of those errors. So to get those errors, what we can do is we can come back into our post form, if I can find it, right here, and we can put back in those errors we had previously. I'll grab these right here and I'll put them right here again. So this is what the form looks like by default. If we now refresh, we can then hit enter here and try this out, and you'll see these get put right here. Now what's interesting is if I grab this turbo frame and I put it down here and I do this, and now if I refresh and I do like a blank post again and click create post, you can see our errors are being rendered down here and we're getting that form just like before because it's just putting that entire content in there. You'll notice when I click create post here, these errors aren't showing up here. So we can verify that these are not being affected by this error, which means we're not getting redirected as well. If we don't have this format turbo stream here, for example, in the case of our error, we can comment this out, save it, come over here, we can get rid of this turbo frame tag. If we now try this, and I do a test and a case, or I leave the title blank and I just type case, if I click create post, you'll see it tells me there's an error preventing this from being saved, but you'll also notice it redirected us, sort of. It gets rid of all of our posts here, and we now are technically on the new post page, but we're still in the root directory. Because of how this redirect is happening, it's a little bit confused. It just renders the new action without actually redirecting us to like posts/new, because that's where it should be taking us. So right here, we can hopefully see that it's rendering the layout. And right here, it says rendering post/new within layout/application, rendered the post form, and then post/new.html.erb. So it's like quasi redirecting. If I go over here and I do the same thing, you'll see it doesn't really affect this because you're already on that path. But when it happens on like your root, it can be a little bit confusing where like all your stuff went. It's just because it is doing that redirect. We can of course put this back and put back the turbo frame tag here. Move it back up to the top, save this and refresh and do this, and it's right back to working how we had it previously. So it is really nice in some ways to sort of break it out like this. I think I actually prefer this approach over having these renders in the controller where we had the turbo streams. And especially if you have something like the create action, it does, to me at least, make a lot more sense to have a separate file where you have all these turbo streams happening. You can of course come in here and just type some text, right? So we'll just put, well, let me make it a bit more unique. We'll just do something like this. I'll save this. We'll come over here, and this is for a proper creation. So let me just do a test case 1, 2, 3. We can click create post. It'll give us a test case 1, 2, 3 right here. And if we do a control F, we can see this gets put just at the bottom of the page. So you can do stuff like that if you'd like to. You can also do like, you know, pretty much anything you want to throw on the page in some way, shape, or form. You can try to do that and just see what you can get away with. The issue is, of course, some of it's going to be a little bit wonky because it's not really behaving how you would expect it to. So you can come in here, check your elements, and you can look for the script, the alerts right here. But of course, the alert's not going to fire like that because your ordering is a little bit off with just sending it. So it's not going to work entirely like a js.erb file would. But you can get away with some pretty sneaky stuff if you make sure that you're waiting for the document to load and all that. But yeah, I just thought I'd cover this because this really doesn't seem to be talked about a lot or at all if you're not looking at like specific GitHub issue pages and a couple tutorials from people that aren't affiliated with Turbo. So I'm not really sure what the point of that is. But once you see this pattern, it does make it a lot easier to use because, again, you just throw everything into one file and it's a little bit separated from your controllers and stuff, and you get a bit more of a sense of what this is doing because like this same thing up in your controller, you'd have something like a turbo_stream.prepend for your posts with a target of whatever you want to target. Let me do this. TurboStream.prepend with a target of, I don't know, new or posts lists or something, and then your partial, which is your post partial, and then your locals, which is your post of at post, right? You have all of this, and then all of this happens not in here, but, and this is a bit, you know, contrived, but you'll hopefully see the idea. It all happens in here inside of your format turbo stream, and then suddenly you have to go over to like the next state over, the next zip code over, to see what this line of code is even doing. I think it's a lot better to do it, to do it this way, where we have it in a separate page, and you just open up the page and you can see everything that's happening with this turbo stream just in one place, right? So yeah, I know I droned on a bit here, but hopefully you see the value of this, and yeah, hopefully this was interesting and helpful, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.